Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. In the last tutorial we set the scene for our Batman style death animation where we can drag in specific montages, animations, we've set the data up ready for it, and when we simulate it we've at least got something that roughly looks like the Batman Arkham one where they lean down, they taunt you, and then they walk away. It's going to be very cool once we get it up and running, but in part 2 what we're going to look at is actually applying the death animations, all the structures and the data table we set up. We're actually going to create the controller that's going to loop over it, track what needs to actually spawn, and then spawn it in the world. So let's get started. So I went through and I added a bunch more different death animations for all my variety of guards and stuff like that. And it's the same process as what we did, and I've gone and actually added all the different sword ones in too for each specific NPC. So let's go and create the death scene controller, which is basically the thing that's just going to spawn this in and make it work. So the key thing about this is we don't actually need a player pawn or controller in this scene at all, because it's just a cinematic thing, that's all it is. It's like an interactive movie with a menu at the end. So on our world settings, I've got it set to my main game mode, that if I click play normally, lets my character spawn in, which we obviously can't see at the moment because it's too dark, but you can see my character is there successfully, so I can run around and everything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come and create my own game mode and my own controller with no pawn on it, and we can just deactivate it, and that controller will act as the death controller as well. There may be better ways around this, but this is what I've done for all my other games when I've got a specific section. So you'll see that I've also got a main menu game mode here, which has its own specific stuff in there. So like there's a player controller for the main menu, which all it does is spawn the main menu. That's it. But it also gives us the options to limit other things. So like we can say the player can't interact with anything, and this is where you fade in, fade out, play the animations, all stuff like that, and it's all tied nicely together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my blueprints folder and I'm going to create a new folder called game modes, but I've already got one. I'm going to right click and choose blueprint class, and I will just search for game mode base. It's right there in the top common ones, and I'll call it GM_death scene, and I'll open this up. So we basically just need to assign a bunch of stuff here. For most of it, including the player pawn, we can just keep as none because we don't really need it. Data class, we'll just keep it as that because it needs something to do. Then I'm going to come into my blueprints controllers folder, or create a controllers folder. Right click blueprint class and I'll choose a player controller, and I'll call this BP player controller score, and I'll just call this one death scene. And I'll open this up. So this one is where we're going to actually run all the querying and stuff, but for now we'll just leave it empty. I'll go back to my game mode death scene, and I'll make sure I set the player controller to be our new death scene one like so. Finally, back on the level here, in world settings, just set your game mode here. And now you'll see, if you press play this time, it's still very dark, it is. You'll see if I just temporarily come and set the sky to be middle of the day and run it again, so you can see I'm pretty much static. I can't do anything, which is perfect, and it's exactly what we need. So let's set the time of day back to 0. There we go. So, back on our player controller then, our new one, how do we want to handle this? So on the event graph here, on event begin play, this is where we're actually going to go off, loop over, and find everything we need in the game. So we're going to loop over the data table here. So I'm going to create a function inside here called getDeathScene, and then inside here, I'm going to drag off and do get data table row names. For the table, I'm going to search for our death scenes there, and then I'm going to loop over it. So now this is going to give us all the columns which are inside here, and this is where we can start looping over it. But we actually need to know which faction, which NPC, which damage type, blah blah blah, all of that it is. For that, we're going to sort that out later, just after this. But what we can do for now is we'll just add it as input parameters to death scene. So for me, I want to do the faction first, so we'll actually get the row now. So off of here, I'll just drag off it and do get data table row, that one there. We'll pick the same data table again. So this one's given us all the keys. This has now got us the values. So from the out row, we can break on it, and you'll see we've got all the different properties there. So for now, for all of these that I want to query, I'm going to add as input properties to the function here. So on the inputs, I'll add in the faction, will be my e-race. I'll add in the NPC name, which will be a generic name, guard, a specific name, whatever, and that'll be type text for me. The damage type, will be an optional one. So I'll set that to Unreal's damage type, and we'll treat that as optional in the code. We'll make sure we get the soft class for it. Then finally is the quest, and I'll just search for my narrative quest or whatever you're using, and that'll be another soft class for me, like so. We don't need to worry about the NPC classes in animation detail because that's the result of it. So first thing we're going to do, I'm going to drag off faction and do equals equals, and you'll see equals equals enum, like that. The enum we want to check will be our get faction, and by doing get faction it's just a shorthand of getting that variable there. So we can add that in. So for anything required, as in you must be this faction, you must be at this NPC name, what I'm going to do is just drag off of here and do an and, like so. And we can plug the and into the branch. So it must be this faction, it must be this NPC name. So I'm going to drag off of this and do equals equals, and you'll see equals exactly text, which is what we need. We can plug that into the and, like so. So that we'll just drag off this and do get NPC name. This is where we come to the optional parts of it, and this is where we need to think how we want to handle it. So if you have a animation that matches this faction and this NPC, but it's got no damage type and no quest, do you want to pick that one over one that matches exactly the damage type and exactly the quest? Well, it's up to you. It depends how you want the game to work. In my case, I think the more properties it has available, the more it warrants being chosen. So if something equals the faction and the NPC name, it should be chosen most of the time. If it also matches the damage type, it should be picked more above the standard ones. And if it matches the quest as well, then it should be holy grail, it should be picked kind of thing. So what I'm actually going to do is build this up almost as a ranking system, because we still want the order of randomness to it if we do have multiple supported ones. So we need a way of ranking them, basically. So what I'm going to do is, if they're required, if they meet at least the required ones, I'm going to log them as saying this is okay, but I'm also going to append a value next to it to say how likely it should pick it, like a percentage if you wish. And then if it meets the damage type and the quest, it will also add an additional ranking to that chosen ranking, so we know what it should be. So we need a way to add this specific row to it, but also a ranking next to it. Now unfortunately, Unreal won't let us create a map based on a struct as the key, which is rather annoying. So what I'm actually going to do is come back to my structs folder, and in my death scene, I'm going to create another struct next to it called s_chosen death scene. And all it's simply going to be is our existing death scene, but it'll also be the ranking of it. So how likely should we pick it? And I'm actually going to come and set this to a float, like so. And then we'll hit compile and save. And then back on our controller, I'll create a new local variable called chosen scene. And instead of s death scene, I'll set it to our new s chosen death scene. And I'll make it an array, like so. So if it meets the required ones, I can drag the chosen scenes in, and I can choose add, connect it to true. From the item, I can choose make. So what death scene does it want? Well, it wants this one here. So we'll just promote this to a local variable called current death scene. And that means we can use it all the way over there without having to tangle up our arrows. So I can come and plug in the death scene that we've chosen, so the current one. And then the ranking is something we're going to build up. So I'm actually going to just drag this down and do add, like so. So if it meets both of these, I've got 4 items on mine. To make it easy, I'm going to say 50%. So it'll be 0.5, so 0.25 per one. Then I'm going to add another pin and drag off the damage type and say equals equals. And say if this damage type equals the get damage type. So if those two soft class references are the same thing, then from this one, I can just do a select float, like so, and I can plug this damage type into it. If it equals it, which is pick A, then it'll add 0.25 to it. If it doesn't equal it, it'll add 0, which will do nothing. And I can do the exact same thing just below for the quest here, and we'll tidy this up shortly, and we can plug that into the third value. And I can also do get quest, which is the one I passed into it, like so. So if we just come and tidy this up a little bit, I'll drag these down a bit, and I'll drag this one across. I'll comment this, saying required checks. Then I'll drag this one up a little bit all by itself. And I'll wrap it in a comment saying damage type check. And then finally for this one, I'm actually going to come and drag the current death scene down here to get rid of the large arrow. And I'll just do get quest. I'll just break it and I'll add the quest into here, like so. So it just makes it a bit smaller, look. And we can hide unconnected pins. There we go. And we'll say check quest. Now, of course, if you want these to be not a ranked based system, but you want it to be an absolute system, so you will say if it's got a quest, if it's got the right damage type, it picks that full stop, it doesn't rank them, then you may have to loop over this several times in order to check all the ones with 4 values, then loop over again to check all the ones with 3, then until you find the required ones. For me, the ranking systems, I like the randomness of it, where even on a quest that it's supposed to sometimes have a unique one, it can just be a default one, which I do kind of like. Because the requireds will pick it up if it needs to anyway. And then this will be our ranking system, rankings setup, and then we add that to the chosen scenes like that. So this is going to come in, it's going to loop over all of our death scenes, it's going to check, does the faction that's just killed you and the NPC name that's just killed you match? If they do, then it's going to come and try to add to the ranking system, but whilst it's adding it at 50% chance it'll pick it, it's going to check the damage type and the quest. So if you get killed by a guard using a sword, the damage type won't equal it, so it'll still be 50% because it's not picked the right one. So if you get killed by a guy with a sword, but the type doesn't match what we need because we're looking at the spear one, for example, then it'll give it a low chance that it's actually going to check that one. We could even put it into a negative, so it's less likely to pick this one because it's a different one. But I'm going to keep it at 0 for now, so it's just not got as high a chance. And then the same with the quest here. Eventually with the quest, we may have to add in to actually check if the quest is currently active, but that's something we'll look at later. So now that we've got our ranking death scene system picker thing, what we can do from the completed is we can now pick and return whichever chosen scene we actually want to use. So what I'm going to do, just under all of this, I'll just move it across a little bit, I can even move it up. So what I'm going to do under all of this is I'm going to drag in our chosen scenes like that, and I'm going to drag off and I'm going to type for each to loop over it, and I'll connect this exec up to here. Then I'm going to drag off of the array element and choose break, and then finally I'm going to drag off the ranking and do random bool with weight like so. And this will basically give us a boolean which is going to basically weigh itself against a value. So if we set this ranking to 1 because it matches all 4 of these criteria, it's going to pass 100% of the time. So as soon as this loop hits it, it'll go pick this one because that's it. But there is the odd chance that it may come to this one which has only got 50% and it will pick it because 50% of the time it will pick it. And then same with if it's only got 3 of these matching 75% of the time, because it's got more validity to be able to play that animation because it matches more of the criteria. To make it a little bit more pseudo-random, what we could do is drag off of chosen scenes and also just call shuffle like that, and connect that up to completed. So all that will do is not just go necessarily based on the order that it's added to it, it will completely randomise it, then it will loop over the new randomised version and try to figure out what to do. If it successfully finds what it wants to do, then I'm going to simply add return and then pass in the death scene to the return node like that, and that'll be our chosen death scene. However, if we get to the end of this completed, all of these random balls with weight might have actually not passed. So say if we've got 4 of the required checks but none of these, so none of them are 100% pass rate, all of them may fail 50% of the time. It could fail, it can happen. So in this case, just as a final backup, all we're going to do after the newly chosen shuffle is we're simply going to get the first version and we'll simply add return like so. So all we're going to do is just get the death scene from it. So I'll just break on the death scene and we'll connect the death scene to it. Just as a final backup thing, if we've got none, we will pick that. And we can wrap all this in a comment, return the chosen death scene, like so. So that is our code. It's a little bit more complex than what you might think it would be, and you might not want it this complicated. I like the randomness of it, which is why I'm going it this way. I want it sometimes that you may die in the middle of a boss fight, and there's a chance that that boss will not be the one to mock you. It could be one of his lackeys. It adds to it. If you, of course, want it to be like that, like I say, make sure these return negative numbers. So if this returns 0.25, if the damage check doesn't match, and this returns 0.25 if the quest doesn't match, then it will cancel out this one up here. And if this ranking at the end is 0, it's got 0% chance of picking it. So that's another way you can get around that and still have it match up. So with all that passed in, back on our event graph, we can now call our get death scene like that. And it's a big juicy function. Look, we need to pass in loads of stuff to it, which for now, we're just going to fake it because we haven't built that section yet. So I'll do that in the next tutorial on how we do it. But I'll just say, for the testing, the knighthood, the guard with no damage type and no quest, that's the one who killed you. Perfect. And if I break off of this structure, we've got everything we need here for the NPC class and the animation details for what we need to build up. So I'm going to drag off the NPC class and I'll just choose random to get a random NPC. I'll also do a random array item on the animation detail. So for performance wise, before we carry on, what I'm actually going to do is promote this death scene to a variable here. And I'll call it chosen death scene. And the reason I'm doing this is every so often when you start async loading things, even in arrays and with a function, it can cause it to load the wrong one, or it'll cause it to re-loop the function again, giving you different values. I was doing a tutorial the other day that I will remain nameless just for now. Comment in the description if you can figure out which tutorial it was where I ran into this. I was having a very similar setup where I was randoming over it, but then it would pick random versions of it because it was rerunning the function again, because that's just what Blueprints does. So just to stop any of that, I'm caching it. So this is my chosen death scene. And then I can break that chosen death scene. The random NPC class, I will drag up of this and say async load it. And we can plug that in because we want this to be memory efficient. I can then resolve this under it. And finally, I can call spawn actor from class and we can plug in our class like so. For the spawn transform, we already have that on our animation detail. So I'll just break on this random here and I'll plug the offset into it like so. The collision handling, I'm going to say always spawn. Ignore any collisions, always spawn the character. The name is a variable I've created on my NPC that I'm going to get rid of, so ignore that for now. And that should be everything we're happy with. The final thing we want to do is tell this guy to play an animation. And that's our animation here. So I'm going to drag this over here and call async load asset for the animation. Plug it into here. And then we'll also resolve it just under it, like so. We'll tidy the code up in a moment. We can drag off the return value. I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm going to drag off, I'm actually going to get the character mesh. So the main mesh that all characters have. And from here, I'm going to call play montage. And the reason we're doing this is this version of montage can accept notifiers and tell us when it's finished, which is perfect for us fading in, fading out, playing the dialogue and telling the scene what to do. And then we'll just put the montage in like so. Let's tidy this up a little bit because it's getting a bit liney and I don't like that a lot. So just before we break this over here, what I'm actually going to do is promote this random animation detail to a variable called chosen animation. And I'm actually going to tell it to randomize before we spawn the character, like so. And the reason we're doing this is because if it promotes it to an animation just there, and we'll cross these two wires here, we don't need to worry about picking the animation down here. We can just simply come in and grab our chosen animation and tell it to get the transform right here where it needs it. And then we can do the exact same thing for loading the animation here, that way. So it does look a lot neater. And we'll space it out a bit more. I guess this is one benefit of C++. You have your own ways of managing it, but you don't have to fiddle around with all the Y's and the nodes. You just comment a couple of lines. But C++ is not for everybody, and I'm still learning it myself. So there we go. So if we wrap this in a couple of comments, so this first one will be get the death scene. You equally could do the random parts inside the get death scene if you really wanted to. That's another option, but for me, I'm okay. So this one, it will be spawn the character. So I'll do spawn the NPC. And then finally, this one will be play the animation, like so. So, in theory, ladies and gentlemen, if we try this now, it should spawn the NPC in, and it should play an animation based on the faction being knighthood and the name being guard. So let's give it a test and see how far we are going along, really. So if we test it now, I'm just going to temporarily set the time of day to 1200 so we can see. But if I click play and then instantly click Shift F1 and pause it, like that, so click play, Shift F1 to break out, instantly click pause, and I break out, you can see the character is officially there. If I click play now, you will see him act out, but he's playing it sideways, and this is something a little bit confusing, but it is indeed playing it, which is very cool. So the reason he's playing it sideways is if I drag my NPC in, his default direction for 000 is that way. We need it to be that way, to at least match everything we've done. So, what I'm actually going to do is just place him at 000 like so, and then we'll probably lift him up just so he's actually on the floor. So I'll drag him up and press end. Then I'm going to grab everything I need to rotate, such as my spotlight, my camera, and my player, and I'm going to rotate them 90 degrees. So I'll make sure I've got snapping turned on. So we're going 90 degrees. And then I'm going to move it back to the centre and then move it out the same direction like that. So it's just at the bottom of the feet. So the camera is still pointing at the correct place. So if we select the camera like so, we can see the body's there. They're going to bend down and talk to us, which is what we want. And that's what the offset's for, to move them back if they're too close. So if I delete that now, and if we play it again, and then Shift F1 pause, we can see they're now facing us. So if we play it this time, they walk up, they look at us, they stab us because we died with a sword apparently, and then that was the end of the animation with that one. So the stab on that one needs to be an instant boom, that's it. So, let's fix a couple of things on this version. So, we need that to actually use the camera to make it look through the camera, otherwise it's going to look wrong. So, super simple, back on our player controller, all I'm going to do before we actually pick the death scene is I'm going to drag out. I'm going to drag off of this and do set target with blend. So, set view target with blend. And all this wants is a camera and a controller that we actually want to use. So, for the controller, you can see it's defaulting to self, that's fine. For the new view target, let's drag it off of this and we will do get all actors of class. And the class we want is our sign camera. And then we can drag off and just do get, really. And we'll plug that into the view target like so. The blend time will say 0, instant, snap to that camera as soon as it starts. And that's what should give us the camera view. So if we compile and save and try it this time, you should see we shouldn't have to break out of it now. We should see it straight away. There we go. He comes in. He stands there, he does some taunting animation, then he backs away. How cool is that, ladies and gentlemen? It's coming along nicely. I am, however, going to come and select the spotlight and the character, and I am going to move them back, because that animation was very, very close. Let's try it again. So he walks up, you can see he's there, he's taunting us, saying, "What are you doing?" blah, 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 and then he walks away. So we definitely need to improve the camera angles and the fading and everything. So let's drag it back a little bit more, and let's try it now. There we go, we can see the top of the head, he comes in, he's doing something down there, laughing at us, some rocks, and then he walks away. There we go. If we set the sky time back to 0, so it's dark as well, it'll really sell the illusion. There we go, he walks in, he's all dark, look at that. He's saying something, he walks away. We can't see his hands, and I do want to see his hands, so I might expand that. But that is coming along very nicely. I do wish the animations, I wish I walked away further, but I don't have that much recording space. So we'll just have to make sure the fade takes that into effect. We can even change the camera. But for the fact I couldn't see his arms, I am actually just going to come and set the outer cone. I'll probably set it to 30. Let's try it again. There we go. We can see more of his body now. There he goes. He comes in. I don't think the animation's been edited, but I'll double check. There we go. And he comes... Ah, yes, when he steps back, we really sell that one. I like it. But yes, you can see it goes back to idle, which is completely okay. We need to work it in. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is part 2. And it is really cool to come in and play it. And it just works, look. Oh, I've used the wrong animations here. I need to edit a couple of these. I don't think I've finished editing them. I'll make sure to put an updated link out. But there we go. He mocks us and walks away. Ah, yes. When he walks away and his legs shadow up. I'm actually quite enjoying this. This is the first time I've seen it in full action. How cool is that, ladies and gentlemen? And he walks away and he just walks into the shade because he walks out of it. That's cool. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is tutorial 2. In tutorial 3, we're actually going to start plugging into the notifiers for each animation. And we're going to make it so the camera fades in, plays it, fades out, and then the fade out will trigger the NPC to disappear, but it'll show the UI menu. That's what we want to do. So we've only got a couple more to do. We'll make it so it fades in, fades out. We'll make the menu show itself to restart the level. And then finally, we'll plug it in so we can actually get the real world values of what killed you in the game. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I hope it helped. If you've got any improvements, please let me know below. I will make sure to get those animations updated before I do put them out so you have better ones and it's not glitching out like it does, because you saw me step in and step out. That's how I record as well. But yes, thanks for watching. My name's Decryption and I'll see you next time.